Hello and greetings. Welcome back to another Perspectives chat. Um, as regular listeners are aware of, I tend to jump from different scales of subjects, from the physical and more localized to the larger topics. And the last one I spoke on was the death of cultures, the larger grand cycles. This one is a subject which I don't particularly, I'm not keen on really speaking about it, but it actually came across my radar a few days ago, last week, because last week I was a part of the Quartet discussion group, as some of you know that I participate in, and the subject that we were asked to speak about was what is frequency, and how do you how do you change your frequency? And when I first heard that question, I thought, ugh, because it's a question, it's an issue, it's a concept that has been used so broadly and so misused, so exploited, so easily spoken about in very blasé terms. And I tend not to get involved with these waters, which are already quite muddy. However, I thought I would more or less discuss what I talked about in that talk, because also I had a terrible internet connection, and I was cut off several times and my reception was not good. So maybe the frequency demons were making sure that I didn't get my point across. So I thought I would kind of return to that issue here. Because of course, the well-known inventor and visionary Nikola Tesla did make the well-known statement that he said, if you want to learn the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I think it's no secret at all that all manifestation, all existence is a state of frequency, because matter is a state of what we know as denser frequency, energy in a denser, less active form. And just to put it simply, we know that if we take ice and we give it some energy input, the frequency changes of ice and becomes water. We have more energy input, then that water becomes steam. It changes form. But I don't like this notion of higher frequency. People say, you have to get to a higher frequency. Well, if you want to get to a higher frequency, well, it kind of makes you think that you need to go somewhere, And also the higher frequency is it was exploited a lot during the New Age rhetoric and narrative, of course. It makes you think you have to go vertically up, like there's a higher frequency up there, etc., a kind of hierarchical understanding. So the way I approached that question was, I said that let's not think in terms of going to a higher frequency, rather let's consider shifting our frequency. And we can also refer to as resonance, shifting our resonance. So we're not going anywhere, but we're shifting our state. And that can be also a state of cognition, a state of perception, a state of awareness. All these things are shifts in our resonance. And we know that we exist in a sea of frequencies. Right now around me there are Wi-Fi and there's different electromagnetic frequencies. We don't perceive them. And same thing, if we're listening to a radio, we just have to change the tuning slightly and we get a different radio station. So we're still in the same zone. all these frequencies share the same or similar space, let's say, but of course we don't intermingle so much. We choose, and that's I think is a significant point there. We choose the frequency that we align with. So what I did say is that in the very, very basic terms, the extremes of frequency, at the extremes we have chaos and we have order, and then we have all the iterations and all the degrees in between. And this scale of order and chaos is what has been the foundation for our physical reality and our physical cosmos. And that generally the evolutionary stream, the trajectory is going towards coherence, equilibrium, order. But of course, chaos, you need chaos because you cannot have order without chaos, basically, because if there's no chaos, there wouldn't be order, it just would be. And chaos is often a catalyst to come out of chaos and to use the energy in the chaos to recalibrate towards a state of order. So the two are intermingling, and all along the scale you have various degrees of chaos intermingling with various degrees of order, and we can go towards greater chaos or greater order. Some of the religious texts or spiritual texts have talked about gross matter and subtle matter, that the greater density is in the gross form, the gross matter, and that by refining ourselves or refining our state of being, we move towards a subtle form. So that you see, this has been talked about in different languages before. What I did say is that we should perhaps bear in mind two things I pointed at. Is one is attention, and the second thing is identification. Because where we put our attention to, then of course that attracts and tries to align our resonance. And so if you're resisting something, if you're resisting, let's say, war, if you're resisting war, you are still aligning with the resonance of war. And what you, I mean, it's a cliche, what you resist persists, because you're acknowledging that this energy state exists. And it's a form of entrainment. And I'm aware that we know we're talking about with entrainment, it's a kind of, you resonate with something else in alignment, just like tuning a musical instrument. I'm just reminded, I went off track because I'm reminded that several years ago, the great singer-songwriter Van Morrison had a song on his album, I think an album about 7 years ago, and the song was called That's Entrainment. And I remember listening to a radio interview with him, and the radio interviewer said, did you misspell that? Don't you mean to say the song's called That's Entertainment? And Van the Man, being his usual self, gave the interviewer telling off, saying, you know, get your act together. Don't you know anything about entrainment? So attention is an act of entrainment. And we know that, you know, again, the cliche, where attention goes, energy flows. So, and at the moment, there's a great amount of heavier, denser energy in the world because of the activities that are going on. And that's, and as I've mentioned many times, that's pulling people in deliberately, because we, by following those news, by kind of putting our attention onto all these deliberate shenanigans in the theatre of the absurd, as I call it, we actually put our attention there, which then it snaps in an alignment of of resonance. So that's why it's very, very important in these times that we don't play into the game of densification of those energies. So attention is one thing I mentioned, and the second one was identification. And it's a kind of human trait that we self-identify with something. And it can be anything. We can identify with someone else's plight, their suffering. We can identify with most things that are happening externally to us. And of course, if we identify with something and say that's wrong, or identify with that suffering, identify with their situation, of course, that then sets up an energetic vibrational frequency entrainment. So I would say that it's a case of being aware of where we place our attention and what grabs our attention, because everything in the external world at the moment that's been thrown at us, it's been thrown at us in a deliberate manner to get our attention. And then there are certain emotional subjects involved. Of course, we're dealing with a lot of emotional situations right now in the world. And so if we identify with that, then of course that's another way to get us aligned and entrained with that frequency. So these are things which I'm sure all of us in this room, virtual room, are perhaps aware with. And so that's why I said choice is important, because when we have increased chaos or increased chaotic attractors, it also means that that's an opportunity to provide more friction for choosing a path to order. And also when there's more chaos, the pathway to order is more visible, it's more defined. When the chaos is more subtle, it's not so easy to see the path of order. There's less distinction between chaos and order. So at these times of great chaos, the distinction between chaos and order is much more defined, visible, and obvious. So it allows people then to actually make the choice whether they want to be attracted or whether they want to put their attention into the chaos or to seek the order. So in fact, often when we get to the end of stages, the end of cycles, the thresholds of transition, to use all these terms, then there's often a greater distinction between the forces that are operating. And as I've mentioned in the recent essay I put out last week about the Hidden Forces, part 3, about the understanding the light and the darkness, and I probably will speak more on this theme in the future. What I said, and I'll put the link below in the notes, is that these forces are not distinctly separate. You don't have good and bad over here, just as you don't have order and chaos over here. You have an intermingling, and you have degrees of how much they intermingle. And when there's a greater denying force, then it allows a greater visibility or greater perception of the affirming force, which is the force of order. So therefore, in these times right now across the world, despite the heightened chaos, it's also given us an opportunity to be able to better make those choices for now, to which path we're going on. And then making that choice will inevitably put your resonance in alignment with those factors that are also in alignment with the choice of order. And so what I mentioned was we are, of course, existing in a sea of frequencies, and those frequencies are in all different scales. And as I've talked about before in, I think it was perspective number 21, so it's quite a way back, I called it magnetic mind fog. And I spoke about how there is a distinct decrease in the Earth's magnetic shielding, perhaps as much as 30% or 35%. And I spoke about how NASA had stopped publishing these updates because it could actually start to make people more aware, or too aware, I should say, that the Earth is getting a decreasing magnetic shielding, which means there's more cosmic radiation entering. That's nothing too scientific. You know, if the Earth has less shielding, and the Earth, of course, is in a solar system and a cosmic field which is receiving radiation all the time from the sun, from the cosmos, and of course we would not exist without that radiation. So there's more solar cosmic radiation entering through the shielding, and that naturally is going to have an effect. And according to science, and this has been, sadly, it has been tested on animals. There have been tests whereby they put mice in a low magnetic environment because they wanted to test about the effects of being in space in a environment of lower magnetic environment, of course, so more radiation is coming in, and they found that the mice started to act very aggressively in terms of they even turned cannibalistic, and in terms of their sexual predation on the other mice. And so we know also that there's been noted that in times of lower magnetic shielding that there's been increased aggravation or feeling of amongst people, and so what I wish to say is that there are perhaps other forces which are making certain discomfort, making people more irritable, more easily predisposed to aggressive or violent acts, more easily nudged over into reacting. People are more on the edge. So it's not only the fact that there's these denser energies of chaos on the planet, but there's also great solar radiation coming in, which is aggravating the sea of energies, the frequencies, the resonance that we are swimming in. So we have to take note of that. So saying that, it would seem to me even doubly, triply more important that we are focused on grounding ourselves with the earth energy, which can be in all different ways. It can be just as much as going outside and walking in nature, being amongst the trees, trying to get out of the urban environment sometimes and be around nature. It can be something as, trying to take off your shoes and socks and just putting your bare feet on the ground now and again. Or those people who are able to do some gardening. I know you go out there, I like your allotment, and I think likewise, I am involved in my gardening and growing. And even if you don't have a garden, you could put some plants or into your windowsills and just get some earth stuff around you. When you can, and when you go out, touch the earth, touch the soil, touch something, be grounded more. I mean, this is not woo-woo stuff at all. It's just, as we know, when we're plugging our electric socket into the wall, we have an earthing wire in there, and so we are also these electrified, resonant beings. We need to be earthed as well. So with all this going on, and as we are trying to create our equilibrium, our frequency of equilibrium, our resonance, entrainment, we should be mindful of the attention, identification, and also methods of grounding and being with the earth. Because these chaotic energies, these frequencies of disequilibrium are going to increase, and we are going to be impacted by more solar cosmic waves of radiation. And so we are going to have greater discomfort. So I think these aspects are significant. So that's what I wanted to say. I probably said other things in the quartet, but you know, I have to say that the subject of one's frequency is not my preferred subject. It's such a large, broad one, but I thought I'd touch upon it here. So thanks for bearing with me, and as always, stay grounded, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.